Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries. A time of immense change, intellectual ferment, and burgeoning exploration, was both crowded and confining. Space was limited, resources were scarce, and opportunities often felt stifled. Most people never left their villages, their lives dictated by the rhythms of the seasons and the boundaries of their immediate surroundings, their world defined by familiar fields and faces, a small, self-contained existence passed down through generations. Yet, rumors from distant ports, carried on the salty winds and whispered in taverns, spoke of vast lands across the Atlantic, a world unknown and ripe with possibility. Places of strange wonders, exotic creatures, and landscapes unlike anything they had ever imagined. And perhaps unimaginable riches, enough to change the course of a family's destiny forever. These stories drew a diverse cast of individuals from all walks of life, each with their own motivations and desires. Puritans seeking religious freedom, a sanctuary where they could practice their faith without fear of persecution, Spanish soldiers chasing glory, dreaming of conquest and the accumulation of wealth and power, and farmers fleeing poverty, hoping to escape the cycle of hardship and build a better life for their children. What united them? What drove them to leave everything behind? A reckless hope that the future lay across the ocean, not behind them, a belief that a new world offered a chance to rewrite their stories. They gambled everything: their security, their comfort, family, the bonds that held them together, home, the familiar walls that sheltered them, country, the land of their ancestors, for a chance at something new, a life of their own making. This was no simple migration. It was a profound act of faith and desperation. It was a leap into the unknown, a journey fraught with peril and uncertainty that would shape the modern world, forever altering the course of history and the destinies of nations. Let's step into their shoes, feel the weight of their hopes and fears, from the crowded streets of Europe, the bustling marketplaces and the hushed churches, onto creaking ships, the wooden vessels that would carry them across the vast ocean, and finally, to the shores of a new continent, a land of promise and peril. This is the story of the end of one world, a world they knew and understood, and the birth of another, a world yet to be defined, a tale of courage in the face of unimaginable hardship, faith in something greater than themselves, and folly, the mistakes and misjudgments that shaped their destiny, beginning in the old world with dreams of the new. The journey starts now. To understand why so many risked everything, we must walk the muddy lanes of 17th century Europe. In England, enclosure forced families off ancestral lands, driving them into overcrowded, desperate cities. Across the Channel, German states were ravaged by war and famine, making the promise of peace in America irresistible. In Spain and Portugal, younger sons sought fortune and glory in the New World, while France sent fur traders and missionaries deep into the continent. Each nation projected its own hopes and anxieties onto America, shaping their colonial ambitions. The New World became a canvas for dreams and for escape. The push to leave was as varied as the people themselves. What finally drove people to leave their ancestral homes, to embark on such a perilous journey across the vast ocean? What compelled them to abandon everything they knew for the uncertainties of a new world? It was a complex mix of pressures, a confluence of factors that, when combined, created an irresistible urge to seek a better life elsewhere. Religious persecution, the denial of basic human rights based on faith, was a significant catalyst. Economic hardship, the grinding poverty that offered little hope for a brighter future, also played a crucial role. And of course, the powerful lure of opportunity, the tantalizing promise of a better life in a land of seemingly endless possibilities. For many, the freedom to practice their faith without fear was not just a preference, but a matter of life and death. Dissenters faced crippling fines, levied for the simple act of worshipping according to their conscience. Prison, with its harsh conditions and loss of freedom, or even worse fates awaited those who dared to defy the established religious order. The New World, with its vast expanse and relative autonomy, promised a sanctuary, a place to worship freely without the threat of persecution. a place where they could build a society based on their own values and beliefs, on their own terms, free from the constraints of the old world. But economic desperation, the daily struggle for survival, was an equally powerful motivator for many. Land in Europe was synonymous with power, wealth, and social status. But it was almost entirely out of reach for the vast majority of the population, locked in a system of inherited privilege. America, on the other hand, offered land, and with it, the tantalizing hope of economic independence and a better life for their children. The rigid and deeply entrenched class system of Europe left little to no room for social or economic advancement for those born into the lower ranks. In America, however, the promise was that anyone, regardless of their origins, could reinvent themselves, could rise through hard work and determination. European monarchs, driven by ambition and the desire for greater power, saw colonies as valuable sources of wealth and resources. They also viewed them as a convenient way to rid themselves of troublesome dissenters, the chronically unemployed, and the desperately poor. For these rulers, exporting people to the colonies solved pressing problems at home, alleviating social unrest, and reducing the burden on already strained resources. And of course, it simultaneously expanded their power and influence abroad, extending their empires across the globe. For ordinary people, the decision to emigrate represented a chance to escape the crushing weight of poverty, the stifling atmosphere of oppression, and the dead end of social stagnation. It was a chance to break free from the chains of the past and forge a new future for themselves and their families. The decision to leave everything behind was rarely easy, fraught with uncertainty and the pain of separation. But the powerful promise of a new beginning, a chance to build a better life, was simply too strong to ignore for millions. The constant push of desperation and the alluring pull of hope created a powerful dynamic. This dynamic set millions upon millions of people on the move, triggering one of the largest migrations in human history. And so, the stage was set for a truly world-changing migration, a movement of people that would forever alter the course of history. Among the most influential and well-known groups of early settlers were the English Puritans. These individuals sought to establish a society based on their religious beliefs and principles, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape of early America. Their quest for religious purity and a desire to reform the Church of England put them at odds with the English monarchy, particularly during the reigns of kings like James I, who viewed their dissenting views as a threat to his authority. Some Puritans, holding even more radical views, were called separatists. Facing persecution and seeking religious freedom, they made the difficult decision to flee England for the Netherlands, specifically Holland, in search of a more tolerant environment. However, life in Holland presented its own challenges. The separatists found life there alien, culturally different, and they feared losing their distinct English identity and way of life amidst the foreign customs and language. Driven by their unwavering faith and a desire for self-determination, in 1620, a group of separatists, whom we now know as the Pilgrims, embarked on a perilous journey across the Atlantic. They bravely sailed on the Mayflower, a small and crowded ship, facing treacherous conditions and the uncertainties of the open ocean. Their destination was the shores of America, where they hoped to establish a new Jerusalem, a society founded on their religious principles and free from the constraints of the old world. A decade later, during what became known as the Great Migration, thousands more Puritans followed in the Pilgrims' footsteps, seeking religious freedom and economic opportunity in the New World. This wave of Puritan settlers was led by influential figures like John Winthrop, a prominent lawyer and devout Puritan. Under Winthrop's leadership, they established the Massachusetts Bay Colony, envisioning it as a beacon of religious and moral righteousness. Winthrop articulated his vision for the colony with the powerful image of a city upon a hill, a model Christian society that would serve as an example to the rest of the world, demonstrating the transformative power of faith and community. Their mission extended beyond simply escaping religious persecution in England. They were determined to actively build God's kingdom on earth, creating a society governed by biblical principles and dedicated to serving His will. Life in the early colonies was incredibly harsh and unforgiving. During that first brutal winter, nearly half of the Pilgrims succumbed to disease, starvation, and the harsh elements. Yet, despite the immense suffering and loss, their unwavering faith sustained them, providing strength and hope in the face of adversity. They diligently built towns that were intentionally centered around churches and schools, recognizing the importance of both religious instruction and education in shaping their community. Demonstrating their commitment to learning and intellectual pursuits, they established Harvard College in 1636, one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in the United States. Yet, despite their pursuit of religious freedom for themselves, their quest for freedom was often exclusive and limited to those who shared their specific beliefs. Dissenters who challenged their religious orthodoxy, such as Roger Williams, faced harsh consequences, including banishment from the colony and forced exile into the wilderness. The Puritans' legacy is complex and multifaceted, leaving behind a society marked by deep faith, a strong emphasis on education and literacy, and a relentless drive for order, self-governance, and the establishment of a moral society. Their ideals and values profoundly shaped the cultural and political landscape of New England, contributing significantly to the formation of American identity. However, their intolerance towards those who held different beliefs and their strict social control foreshadowed future conflicts and challenges related to religious freedom and individual rights in America. Southward, the Spanish Conquistadors pursued a different dream: conquest and riches. After Columbus, Spain claimed vast American lands, sending soldiers and missionaries in search of gold, glory, and souls. Hernán Cortés, with a few hundred men, toppled the Aztec Empire, aided by tactics, alliances, and deadly diseases. Francisco Pizarro repeated this in Peru, capturing the Inca emperor and seizing unimaginable wealth. The Spanish imposed a strict hierarchy, with nobles at the top and indigenous peoples and enslaved Africans at the bottom. They built cathedrals atop native temples and forced labor on encomiendas. Their legacy, a violent collision of worlds, extraction, and enduring inequality. The Spanish conquest reshaped Central and South America forever. The Atlantic crossing was a harrowing ordeal for every settler. Ships were cramped, filthy, and disease-ridden. Passengers endured weeks of darkness, hunger, and fear. Food was scarce and often spoiled. Water was stale. Scurvy and epidemics were constant threats. Storms battered the ships, and the fear of sinking was ever present. Yet, hope persisted. On calm days, settlers sang, prayed, and dreamed of new lives. The birth of a child at sea was a sign of hope. The cry of "Land ho!" brought overwhelming relief. The journey was a test of endurance and faith. Survival was never guaranteed, but the promise of a new world kept them going. The Atlantic crossing was the first of many trials. Reaching land was only the beginning. Arrival brought new challenges. Settlers faced an alien wilderness, dense forests, unfamiliar seasons, and constant danger. Their first task: build shelter and plant crops before winter. Early years were brutal. Many died from hunger, disease, or exposure. Survival depended on adapting, learning from indigenous peoples, growing native crops, and building sturdier homes. Over time, settlements took root. New England with its towns and schools, the South with plantations and forced labor. These differences shaped the colony's futures, sowing seeds of unity and division. The struggle to survive forged new societies. The land changed them, and they changed the land. The settlers did not arrive in an empty land. Millions of indigenous people lived in diverse cultures across the Americas. Early encounters ranged from cooperation, like the Wampanoag helping the Pilgrims, to conflict and misunderstanding. Europeans saw land as property. Most indigenous peoples saw it as communal. This clash led to endless disputes. As settlers expanded, violence erupted. Wars like the Pequot and King Philip's devastated native communities. European diseases, more than weapons, decimated indigenous populations, sometimes wiping out entire villages. The Great Dying shattered resistance and changed the balance of power. Missionaries tried to convert and assimilate native peoples. often erasing traditions. Colonization brought freedom for some, but dispossession and tragedy for others. The legacy of these encounters still shapes the Americas today. The arrival of European settlers remade the world. The Columbian Exchange transformed diets, economies, and populations on both sides of the Atlantic. Colonies became the seeds of new nations: America, Canada, Mexico, and more. European languages, laws, and cities took root, but so did deep inequalities. The settlers' story is one of bravery and hope, but also conquest and exploitation. Prosperity in the New World often came at the expense of indigenous peoples, and in the South, enslaved Africans. This paradox, freedom for some, destruction for others, defines the settler legacy. Their journey set off a chain of events that shaped the modern world. The echoes of their gamble are still with us, a reminder of the price of new beginnings.